Welcome back to Ed's Trains. I'm going to do something I normally don't do, and that's talk a little bit about the history of the Triplex. The Triplex was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works between 1913 and 1916. They built 3 for the Erie Railroad and 1 for the Virginia Railroad. In 1914, Erie accepted delivery of Baldwin-built 28882 Triplex. It weighed in at about 850,000 pounds. It had 3 sets of drivers. The third one, as you can see, which makes this unique, under the tender. It allowed 89% of the weight to be dedicated to adhesion, so it was probably the most efficient locomotive in pulling freight at the time, and it was designed to pull about 650 freight cars. Erie wanted it primarily to cure a hauling problem that they had, which was hauling freight over the Susquehanna Hill. That grade significantly reduced the capacity of the steamers, most steamers at the time, to be able to navigate that hill. So they probably needed a pusher, and they were hoping that the Triplex would solve that problem. Well, it turned out that it was really successful in doing that, and they ordered up 2 more, and that's why they ended up with 3 of them. However, the Triplexes were retired by the Erie Railroad in 1927 because of the cost of the maintenance and maintaining the full steam pressure for the engine. In the case of the Virginia Railway, it was considered unsuccessful because it could only get up to about 3 to 5 miles per hour, and it required a lot of maintenance. So the Virginian Baldwin was retired in 1920 and converted into a 2880 and a 282 engines, and they were in service until 1953. Okay, Captain Obvious here. The Triplex has 3 sets of drivers, 2 under the boiler, 1 under the tender, and then of course that smokestack. And that smokestack is there because it had a second boiler in the tender that was fed by the main firebox, so it needed an exhaust. One final note: back in 1914, George Henderson, who was kind of behind all this, got a patent for a quadruplex, and that's what that little diagram is. And a couple unique things about it: the engine itself would have 3 sets of 8 drivers under the engine, and then the tender would have another set, so there were 4 sets of 8 each of drivers. And the other unique thing about his design is that he had a cab forward and then another cab at the firebox. Never produced. And in addition to the quadruplex, there was consideration for a quintuplex, but that didn't get anywhere. And a short little video comparing the size of the MTH Triplex to the Lionel Big Boy. The Triplex is no slouch, but the Big Boy still is the Big Boy. Now, in the case of MTH, the best I could figure out is that they produced a total of 9 models of the Triplex. And there are kind of 2 eras, let's say. Proto 2.0 was included in the models built between 2001 and 2008. And then in 2016, MTH then built another 4 using Proto 3.0. Now there's a rumor that Lionel may be coming out with a triplex, a Vision Line triplex, but I guess we'll have to wait and see for that. So that's the history, and now let's take a look at the train itself. It's the MTH Premier model, 20-3109-1, and the first thing you notice, it's of course in a styrofoam box, but it's only a very long, narrow box, generally boxed the way a diesel would be boxed. When you open it up, what you realize is that both the tender and the engine are together. This explains why. They are physically connected. Now, the packaging is terrific, and there's just no question that they didn't want the tender and the engine to move. And there is a screw that physically attaches the tender to the engine. It becomes one unit. There are 2 other physical connections. One is the drivetrain, runs from the motor in the engine connecting the drive wheels and the tender, and also a cable connection between the tender and the engine, which supplies all the connects all the electronics. Okay, what I'd like you to focus on is this drive shaft here. When I start the engine moving, you'll see that drive shaft turning, and this shaft actually runs through the engine because it provides power for the front and rear drives as well as the drive wheels in the tender. And this tender and the engine, as I showed you in that picture, are connected physically. You can't just pull the tender off. So this is kind of cool.